The celebration of International Women's Day will not be complete without highlighting the role of women in journalism who have made gender equality campaigns a front-burner issue around the world for decades. Through these campaigns, women in media have helped to positively shape the narrative on diversity, inclusiveness, girl-child education, and sexual and domestic violence, which ordinarily will have been ignored. But in all this, female journalists have had to find a work-life balance between the high-paced demands of their jobs and their private lives. Now, joining us to further the discussion on International Women's Day, the role of women in media, our work-life experience and motherhood, is Zain Asher, anchor of CNN Newsroom. Based in New York, Zain can also regularly be seen filling in on the network's premier business programs, Quest Means Business, The Express, and First Move with Julia Chatterley. In addition, she has anchored CNN's special coverage around #MyFreedomDay, a global call to action that raised awareness on modern-day slavery all over the world, as well as the deaths of Fidel Castro, boxing legend Muhammad Ali, and singer George Michael. Born in the United Kingdom, Zain graduated from Oxford University, where she studied French and Spanish and graduated with a distinction in oral Spanish. In 2006, she earned a master's degree from Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism. She's fluent in French, Spanish, and Igbo, and is the younger sister of Academy Award-nominated actor Chiwetel Ejiofor. Good morning, Zain. Thank you for joining us.
I love seeing my wedding photos there. I got to reminisce. I got married in 2017 in Portugal. It was a beautiful wedding, and I haven't seen the pictures in so long. I've got 2 kids now.
Every woman should be happy in marriage. Congratulations. And let me just tell you, I'm starstruck.
Ruben! Yes.
We are here in Lagos to have the famous Zain Asher coming to our studio. This is a great achievement. But let's go straight to business. I'd like to ask you, International Women's Day was yesterday. What does it mean for you? I mean, you've been through it, a woman in journalism, a mother, a daughter, and then, how do you think the world should do moving forward?
I think it's my wish that there was no need for an International Women's Day, So it's sort of bittersweet hearing that term in a way, because yes, you want to celebrate women's achievements, but you also want everything that women do and all the milestones that women reach to be ordinary and not necessarily remarkable. I would say that when I think of International Women's Day, I think of, how important representation is, how important it is to see, especially as a Black woman, women that look like me in my roles. And I hope that I can be that for other women as well, because that is just so powerful and so important, especially as a young girl growing up, whether you are Nigerian, whether you are American, whether you're from London, to see women that look like you in high-powered positions. That does a world of wonders for young girls today, I think.
But I want to assure you that you definitely do that for us. For many of us, we're very proud of you.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much.
So I wanted to ask you specifically, what does this year's theme of breaking the bias, what does it mean to you as a woman in the media?
Sometimes I get asked, which sort of bias hurts or hinders you the most? Is it being Black or is it being a woman? Because in the United States, you have to contend with both. I think that when you are in a position of power, for me, the most important thing as I talk about representation is making sure that we all as women use our sphere of influence to lift up other people. Yes, of course, I have a platform as a woman at CNN, but we all have platforms. It doesn't matter whether you are on Arise TV or CNN or you are a woman in the marketplace. We all have platforms and we all need to use our sphere of influence to lift other women up. I also think as women, we need to support each other and stop competing with one another. That's super important to me, to make sure that every single one of us uses our position of power to pass the baton to younger generations.
And I want to talk about that in the context of your personal story, how hard it was for you when you were getting into CNN, when you were doing news reports in New York and getting in, into CNN to be able to do what you've achieved today? I mean, you chronicled that in one of your TED Talks, I think it was.
Yes, it was like 5 years ago I did.
5 years ago.
Yeah.
And funny enough, that TED Talk used to be organized by Chike Ihekwazu.
Yes.
In Houston, in London. So can you just, go through that again?
Yeah, so my first job out of university was actually as a receptionist. I was working as a receptionist for a production company for about 3.5 years, nearly very close to 4 years. And as the receptionist, I really wanted to move up within the production company. That was my goal. But because I was the receptionist, it was my job to serve water to anyone who was coming in to apply for the job that I wanted. I had to serve water to them. So I really did start very, very junior in this business. But I think that the lesson I want to share with young people everywhere, young Nigerians, especially young girls, is that success is never in a straight line. You see me on CNN and, you sort of see, obviously I have my own show and I'm an anchor now. But it was really difficult to get there. And so
the hustle was real.
The hustle was real. And my TED Talk is actually called Trust Your Struggle for that reason. You trust that despite all the sort of pitfalls and the setbacks in your path, that if you hold on, if you continue to push and you continue to fight and you work hard, I really, really, really worked hard to get to where I am, that one day the struggle will pay off. And I think that one of the things that people ask me, what's your advice for success, whether it is, becoming a CNN anchor or whatever it is that you want to do. One of the things that I always tell people is that if there is a way, and obviously it's not possible for everyone, but if there is a way for you to start now in the job that you have to do the job that you want, if there is a way, start doing it. If I could just share a very, very, very quick story.
Knock it out.
There is a very close friend of mine who started in a very junior position at CNN. He had graduated from Columbia University, where I went, and he was a junior sort of PA, making very little money. When the Haitian earthquake happened, a year later, he decided, after a year, to sort of go to Haiti, pack his bags, and film. This is 1 year after the Haitian earthquake, just sort of see how people were coping 1 year after it happened. He came back, even though he was not a correspondent, he was not an anchor, he came back, showed it to them, it was excellent, and CNN aired it. And because of that, they eventually made him a correspondent. So if there is a way, and this is somebody who went from a very junior position within CNN to suddenly, almost overnight, becoming a correspondent because he did the job before he had the job. So that is my advice. If there is a way, and there's not always a way, but if there is a way for you to start now to do the job that you want, you take out the risk element for the people who will eventually hire you. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Well, great wisdom there from Zain Asher, anchor of CNN Newsroom.
That's it, right?
Yeah, that's right. He actually knows the guy who
that's
who
Vladimir
did that.
Duchies, actually.
Yeah. You know that story. Okay, great.
Zain, we'll take a short break. But when we return, the conversation with you will continue. And I hope that other journalists, men, women, young, old, will learn from the wisdom that you have provided. We'll be right back. Zain Asher is still with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Our guest is Zain Asher, anchor of CNN Newsroom. The conversation continues with her. Well, Zain, okay, we've been talking about International Women's Day, the challenges faced by women in the media and other related matters. But you've just written this book.
I have.
Where the Children Take Us. How one family achieved the unimaginable, right?
Yes.
Zain E. Asher.
Yeah.
So, is this a memoir? I've not read it. I've seen
I hope that you do read
Are
it.
you a novelist? No, you can be sure I will. But what is the message in this book? What motivated you to write it?
So I think what motivated me was really the TED Talk that I did. I got so much feedback from that TED Talk. The TED Talk really explained my journey through CNN and also how my mother raised us. My mother is a strong, strong Nigerian woman. And this book is really about how women can really do hard things, especially Nigerian women. My mother was a single mother. The book starts off with probably what I would say was the worst day in our lives. My mother gets a phone call. It was September 3rd, 1988. And the voice on the other end of the line basically said, Your husband and your son have been involved in a car crash. One of them is dead, and we don't know which one. That happened to my family. It turned out to be my father who had passed away, but initially they had thought that everybody in the car had been killed. The bodies were taken to the morgue, and it was only when they arrived at the morgue and began unloading the bodies that they realized my brother was still breathing. And that brother, who I'm incredibly proud of, ended up being nominated for an Oscar for Best Actor. And the book is really about how, in the wake of that horrible tragedy, my mother raised us. And thanks to her grit and certain specific things that she did, we ended up surpassing all expectations. Obviously, I'm a CNN anchor. My brother was the star of 12 Years a Slave. My sister's a medical doctor, and my other brother is a very successful entrepreneur. And it was only because of the kind of mother that I have. And I really wanted to educate Western audiences about this special grit that Nigerians have, especially Nigerian women. They're warriors, they're fighters. Yeah, my mother is a queen among them.
Oh, she clearly is. I mean, this is, like I was telling you, this is right up my alley as a single mother myself. And also want to thank you specifically for highlighting single mothers, apart from the usual narrative that we get. You know the narrative about single mothers, especially Black single mothers.
Definitely.
And you also are highlighting Nigerians as a model minority in the United States. Can you expand on that? Because when usually you're here in Nigeria, you present your green passport, you know the response you get. So why was that important for you to do?
Yeah, well, because I'm very aware that as somebody who's growing up in the United States and, well, I grew up in England, but I've lived in the United States for 17 years now. If this was going to be the first story that a lot of Americans read about an African family, I really wanted it to be informative and educational. Yes, it's about my family, but this book is really a celebration of the Nigerian family. And, you know, one thing that I say in the book is that people may not know much about Nigeria living in the West. Our beaches are not featured in travel magazines. There are no safaris on our savannas. Tourists do not swarm this country to post their pictures near monuments. But the one area where I think Nigerians really do shine is that we have sent armies, and when I say army, I mean armies of ambitious and talented children to every corner of the world. Some key statistics that I sort of bring out in the book, and the book is a personal story. It's not filled with statistics. It's only sort of like a handful sprinkled in here and there. But in 2013, it was stated that even though Nigerians make up less than 1% of the US population, in that particular year, they made up 25% of the students at Harvard Business School. You look at the fact that in 2006, Nigerians were considered probably the most educated immigrant group in the United States. I think it was 4% had doctorate degrees, and a whole significant number had master's degrees. And it's things like that people, we're an overlooked minority in the United States. We're overlooked, sometimes looked down upon. Yes. But I think we have a lot to offer, and I really wanted to educate the world about my people. Because
you hear a lot about Asian tiger moms, don't you?
Yes.
So you try to start the Nigerian tiger mom equivalent. It's important.
I think that, to be honest, there are certain books when it comes to tiger mothering that are a bit controversial because of the tactics, but I really think that in what my mother did, there is a universal sort of universal level of inspiration. And what I mean by that is my mother would find stories and articles about Black success in The Guardian, The Times, The Independent. Any African, especially if they were West African, who had overcome something and soared, she would cut it out of the newspaper clipping and she would plaster it to our walls. So every time we came home from school, we were instantly, despite being raised by a single mother who didn't have much money, who, my mother grew up during the Biafra War, so her education was interrupted. She wanted our notion of what it meant to be Black, not to be necessarily informed by television in the 1990s, but to really sort of change our subconscious, our beliefs in ourselves. And when you come home from school and the first thing you see is images of Black success everywhere on your wall, on this wall, on that wall, in your kitchen, in your bedroom, it really does change the image you have of yourself. And she taught us that we could have what people in these articles had as long as we worked like they did. And so my mother, also when my brother wanted to become an actor, my mother she had a little shop, she was a pharmacist, so she owned a chemist, and she sat and evening after evening she taught herself Shakespeare. reading Measure for Measure, Othello, Twelfth Night, just so that she could push him to be better. Initially she was like, why don't you become a doctor? There was that whole thing. But when the teachers told her, listen, you would be crazy for not letting this boy act. He's so talented. Once she sort of got the message, she was like, okay, let me help him. And she began to sort of study Shakespeare, as a woman who had grown up during the Biafra War to come to England and do that. She's a remarkable woman.
Really?
She's a remarkable woman.
I've been meaning to ask you this question. International host and anchor on CNN, see the world for what it is, being at the top of big stories and everything. What does the power of narrative mean to you in our world today, especially the kind of world we have today? We have a war, which a lot of people don't know what it might end up to be, maybe the Third World War or otherwise. We have uprisings here and there. We have the fight for advancement. What will the power of narrative mean to you? And vis-a-vis your childhood, your background, you growing up, and just seeing your life through a panoramic view, what will the power of narrative mean to you in an ever-changing world?
So one of the things that I try to do on my show, which is called One World, is that I really wanted, it's a show that largely focuses on Africa. Obviously, right now, the focus is, of course, what's happening in Ukraine. That is the biggest story of the moment. But one thing that I've always wanted is to ensure that people, whether they're watching in Sweden or in Italy, can understand why what happens in Africa is relevant to them. We live in a connected world, we live in a global world, and traditionally, it's always been the other way around. Africans have always been taught that what happens in America and what happens in Europe is what should matter and what Africans should focus on. But we are so connected that really what happens in Africa matters to the rest of the world as well. I often say that it is abundantly clear to me that the Western way of life would not be possible without Africa. If you drink tea, if you drink coffee, if you have a cell phone, the tantalite in your cell phone comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo. If you are engaged and you have a diamond ring, there is so much in the Western way of life that would not be possible without Africa. And as I say, this is a continent that has been so overlooked and so undervalued that it's important to me. You talk about narratives. It's important to me that we really understand how connected we all are. And so my goal is to really democratize the news narratives so that it's not so heavily focused on one particular region, being the Western world, not so heavily focused on Europe and the United States, but really that everybody has an equal voice, everybody has an equal seat at the global table. And I think that when you have narratives that everybody can relate to, that can change the world.
Okay, let's break this down. When you hear Zain Asher, nobody will immediately connect you to Enugu State or to Igbo heritage, because it sounds like a Western name. Okay, but you are one of us, you are our compatriot. So I would like to know, how connected are you to your Igbo roots? And what's your original name? Are you Obiajulu or Ijoma or Chidema? We'd like to know. And then beyond that, you were so excited when your husband showed up on the screen during the introduction. Yeah. 5 years down the line, and you are so excited, so romantic. Okay. Yeah. How are you enjoying family life?
Okay, so I have an amazing husband. I have somebody who is, when you just know that God has brought you with somebody, you feel as though, not to get too personal, but I sort of feel as though, I found someone who really makes the sunlight of my spirit shine brighter. Somebody that that by you being with this particular person, it makes the world a better place. That is how I feel. And that's what you're seeing with me lighting up. In terms of me being connected to Igbo culture, I lived in Enugu for about 2 years growing up, from the ages 10 to 12. Put that in. Yes. Does anybody here speak Igbo? No.
Not a word.
Not a word.
No, but I speak some.
Oh, you do? Kekwan Adema. Jisike.
Bekinaje.
Bekinaje. Animeje Afia.
Okay.
I speak, and when I was growing up, I spoke, when I went to school in Nigeria, because part of the book I explained how my mother shipped me back to Nigeria when I was 10, and she did that because she just sort of felt as though if you could live in Nigeria and thrive and survive for 2 years, you could handle anything that the West would throw at you. She did that to toughen me up. In terms of my name, my middle name is Zain. My parents grew up in the north, so Zainab. And then my last name is Ejiofor, and I added Asher. So one of the things that I was dealing with when I was coming up, especially being a receptionist at a production company, is I was going through a really hard time career-wise. I was going through a lot of difficulty, and I would pray and pray all the time. And so really for me, during that hard time, I found a name in the Bible, and I looked up the meaning. Asher means somebody who is, somebody who understands that no matter what happens in their life, they continue to hold on and have faith, and somebody who wants to bring joy to the world. And I just added it on as a way of kind of almost like a mantra, almost like a religious mantra, keeping the faith, understanding that really whatever difficulty, just looking in the Bible and seeing this name, whatever difficulty the world threw my way, that if I just persevered and had faith in God, then I would continue through. So it sort of stuck, but last name is Ejiofor and then Asher, so yeah.
Very good.
I'm just so thrilled when the children of single mothers get to reap the fruit of her labor in every way, even what she did not get to experience for very long by losing your dad, you're experiencing. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
But I wanted to go back to your point about your mother's newspaper clippings and the importance of that, visualization. What would you say about the women, the way women are represented in the media? Obviously, there's you, there's me, there's several of us, but are there enough of us and as diverse as it ought to be? And even the women that are interviewed, obviously you're sitting here today gracing us with your presence, but in terms of the female experts on just a broad variety of things, when you switch on your TV, don't you feel that women are still underrepresented?
Oh my God, I've got so much to say on this topic. So in terms of experts, one of the things I noticed when we launched our show, because with our show, we had because it's obviously I'm the anchor and it's my show, I really sat and thought about what I wanted to do differently. I found that Africans were called on to be experts on issues related to Africa, but in the West, people who were from the West could be called on to be experts on anything, including Africa, including the Middle East, including Europe. So one of the things that I tried to do on my show is to sort of balance it out a bit, meaning that if you're Western and you want to talk about Africa, that's fine, but let's also have an African person on CNN talking about what's happening in the rest of the world. That's important for representation, number one. Second of all, with women and the numbers represented in the media, I think that having low numbers of representation, it goes back to what I was saying, like having a role model, somebody that you can see yourself in front of you on screen. Maybe you can't touch them, maybe you can't reach out and speak to them, but just seeing them there will have a huge impact on the lives of people watching around the world. I'll give you a short story as an example. Does everyone remember Femi Oke?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I have an amazing story about Femi Oke. So when I was growing up as a young girl in London, I would see Femi Oke on the screen. And as part of my mother's sort of desperation for images of black success, every time she came on, my mom would shout up to us, "Nigerian on CNN!" And we would run downstairs and sit in front of the TV. And so as I got older, Femi Oke moved around to different news organizations in the UK. Eventually, I came to America, turned on my TV, and one day I saw Femi Oke on CNN. I was so moved by how well this Nigerian woman had done that I sent her an email, just telling her what it meant to me, just growing up, seeing her on television all those years ago. Surprise, surprise, she wrote me back. She gave me her phone number and she said, "Call me anytime." So kind. I called her and then, we kept in touch over the years. And then eventually, maybe 5 to 10 years later, when I had an interview at CNN, I reached out to her. And she really, in detail, spent hours walking me through what the interview process at CNN was like. These are the questions that they're going to ask you. This is what a typical day at CNN actually is. This is what is expected of you. Don't say this or you won't get the job. Say this and you probably will, that sort of thing. And obviously it worked out perfectly, and I owe a lot to Femi Oke. So seeing a Nigerian woman in that role from the ages of, maybe 17 onwards, not only was it a beautiful representation of my culture, but it changed my entire life. And that is, I hope, something that I can continue to do to other people. And that is why when people reach out to me asking for advice, especially if they actually make the effort to find what my email address is and they've gone to that effort to figure out, what it would be, of course, I will always write them back because Femi Oke did that for me. And she changed my life, seeing a Nigerian woman in that role.
And that's great. And, to put a finger on the word it's permission. They give you permission because they're living their dreams. They give you the permission to live your dreams. Since it's still, in that spirit of International Women's Day, apart from Femi Oke and your mother, obviously, are there other women out there that have given you permission, just to go out and get on and fight even more in life? And you just want to appreciate them?
Well, I think that for me, I like to celebrate, especially on my show, I like to celebrate unsung heroes. There's a woman who has stuck with me that I interviewed quite recently, actually. Her name is Angie Muri-Muriwa, and she runs an organization called CamFed. And I love seeing women who are doing small things in their sphere of influence to try and change the world, especially if they're African women. So Angie, one of the things that she sort of came up with is this idea of social interest, this idea of when young women need loans for SMEs or what have you, she has created a sort of system whereby rather than paying back interest in financial terms, obviously you get a loan, let's say you get a loan for, $500 or $1,000, yes, you pay back the principal, but instead of paying back the interest, 2%, 3%, whatever, in financial terms, she came up with a concept of social interest. Social interest meaning that you pay back interest through mentorship, through lifting other women up. And I just thought that was brilliant. I just thought that was brilliant because, yes, it's all well and good to pay back a loan financially, but if you can pay back a loan and also change the world as well, change the world around you, help other women, lift other women up, support each other, that can change an entire community. And so seeing her story stuck with me. Obviously I'm a CNN anchor, and so I'm at the point now where I'm now trying to sort of use my voice to highlight those who are underrepresented, unsung heroes, trying to use my voice to change the world. I mean, I had Femi Oke coming up the ranks, and now it's really my turn to give the microphone to other people who are trying to use their light for good as well.
Excellent story there, Zain,
so much, yeah.
about women supporting other women, which is an important part of the narrative, about women empowerment. As many women that go up the ladder, other women should also be pulled up. And I guess it should be the same narrative.
Yeah, you've got to leave the door open behind you. You've got to leave the door open.
Thank you very much. We're excited. We're fans, as you can see.
Yeah, thank you.
We're glad that you could spare the time to be part of this program today.